This pop-up appeared for just 2 years. An attraction including a haunted house that would open. In October, it was formally known as Haunted Hill House due to the fact that there a sign that appeared to have been purchased from Party City or something equivalent. Supported by the parking lot in front of. The parking lot said, Haunted Hill House. The space wasn't a parking lot at all. Simply grip that was identified as a parking lot, and this year they shut down, and this year was my. I went with pals, and I went with Matt. Eddie and Michael went on a Thursday night when we were in college and everything. Fridays were off for both of us, so it was certainly not as noisy as it would have. Spent a weekend there, which was unexpectedly not waiting in queue at the ticket booth, and when we adhered to the entrance's instructions, there was merely a very brief queue. I think there are maybe 4 individuals in front of me. However, we were unaware of the fact that only one individual was being admitted at a time. At one point, we were unaware that was a component of. If anything, this spooky house would increase the fright if we pushed Michael. I came in second to go first. Penultimate before Eddie. Each couple of minutes, they would inform the subsequent individual to enter. When Matt entered before me, I genuinely began to feel anxious, but I hadn't. I've been doing haunted houses since I was I was with my family then, along with a small child. As this woman, it was my turn to enter. Wearing a bloody costume that was unlocked the door and instructed me to go inside, so I did. Via the door, and as it closed behind. I was in this dimly lighted building. Mostly through tiny flashing lights as I passed through, I saw a number of gory props of disfigured corpses and other gruesome objects. Occasionally, performers would dress in horrible costumes would leap out of the surrounding area. Corners or via tiny openings in the walls, and almost every time they caught me because I jumped in some 2 rooms separated by a dim hallway when I had a reminder of something from. I screamed briefly behind me as I turned, and I could make out in the shadows I chuckled at the tall person in front of me. Something I wasn't after witnessing it. Anticipating what would happen next, the actor began forcing me to go down this dark. I could barely see anything in the hallway. Was complying with it, believing this was included in the attraction, but I'm not sure. Recall the precise amount of time I was allowing. This performer pushed me into the shadows. However, he finally stopped, and I heard the door closed, and everything proceeded. I was silent and unaware of what was going on. I continued to believe this was a component of the performance. And I must admit that I was afraid because it pitch black, and then I sensed hands grasping me, but in a strange manner, not like an actor in a spooky house. Should I have been completely seized? And I pushed them away and told them to get. I stood there, buddy, and the off me. I said, you're going too far, and there was stillness. You can't touch people that way, guy. Believing that this was still only a portion of the. I waited there for the haunted house act. Anticipating that the actor will advance me to the attraction's next segment or just take action, but nothing came of it. Now that I understood, enough time had passed. This wasn't correct, therefore I removed my phone despite their warnings that we shouldn't remove our phones whenever possible during the allure. I activated the torch and discovered that I was in a storage room furnished with cleaning supplies and props. But if I claimed that was the case, I would be lying. The first thing that caught my attention was something that drew my eye was the tall a man standing 3 or 4 times away from me. Didn't appear to be an actor. Wasn't dressed in a costume, he was simply wearing a black face mask and all black. Half of his face covered. As I said, "What are you?" I searched for the door. "You doing, dude?" He remained silent. Recently began using these gestures with his arms as though he were pretending to. Intended to be a character, then I discovered the. I used my phone, closed the door, and left the room. Torch to find your way back down the dark hall was the path we took when I discovered the actor who shouted at me next. Switch off my torch, I informed them. Raped and violated by someone who could or might not be effective for the attraction. And I wanted to go as soon as possible. Indicate that the performer was most likely just some adolescent who is roughly my age and he truly had no idea what to do. Abandoned his persona and instructed me to simply keep moving in that direction and know that I'm. Near the end, I inquired where his boss was. He stated that I would need to return to the little manager's ticket stand. The ticket stand is connected to the office. I thus carried on with the remainder of the haunted house. Speed walking demonstrates that I was only attempting to leave, and some. When I left a few minutes later, I discovered all. 3 pals of mine were perplexed. How I got out the last time I told. We all went after telling them what had transpired. I went to the ticket booth and requested the employee told the manager that he wasn't there tonight, but he would return tomorrow. I explained to the employee what occurred, and she promised to notify. I asked the team about it and asked for my money back as a result, and she returned me. The day after my 30th birthday, a girl submitted by someone we all knew from our college said she was sexually offensive on Facebook. Being attacked by a member of the same haunting house the previous evening, we were. Additionally, this was the reason the location was ultimately closed that month when I made contact with her on Facebook. Seemed to indicate that we had the same exact experience. The aggressor alone received a lot more. She pressed charges against her after getting physical. The one who owns the attraction for me. Presuming carelessness on the part of the attraction employees. Naturally, vowed that the man who attacked us both, but it wasn't really work there, I'm positive of it, but I don't know how they were unable to appropriate security protocols in place to stop anything similar from the second story occurring. This was the initial and final. The first time I visited a haunted house. My home is in Fort Worth, Texas. And there's this large scary house every year. Residence that provides access to some of. This year, my pals wanted to go, and I decided it was time for me to finally spend some time in a creepy house. In the beginning, I had a really difficult upbringing that led to my development. PTSD, but I'll talk about that more later. Nobody wanted to go because it was the weekend. My friend Noah hosted a sober event. It was a little prelude for all of us. There will be 6 of us, my 3 boys. 2 of their girlfriends and friends. We drank and smoked in Noah's garden. Everyone believed it would make the have more pleasure. We purchased our tickets to the attraction on their website during our pre-gaming sessions. I hardly ever used marijuana since it makes me quite suspicious, but I suppose tonight I wish to give smoking another go to see if I could get past that obstacle, and I thought. Nice, in fact, I believe the alcohol mixture. While marijuana somewhat nullified the typical. I would think negatively if I just smoking by ourselves, so we finally called in. Uber took about 20 minutes to get to the attraction. A little distance from Noah's residence, there was. After a half-hour wait, the location was lovely. Active, we became amiable with those in queue in front of us. I was somewhat To be honest, I cross-faded, but I wasn't gone. As if I can recall almost everything. That took place when we arrived at the front. Began to feel a little lightheaded, but I didn't tell my pals whatever we went in. The eerie mansion, and right from the beginning. There was a great deal of shouting and energy. The performers were excellent. However, it was severe and beginning to provide. I was beginning to understand how anxious I was. How much of a mistake I made and how not okay I was. Getting stoned was among the haunteds. House performers must have understood how. I watched, afraid and silent, and he decided to try to frighten me by getting in my face. I'm not going to shout and make noises. To be honest, I was beginning to panic, but I was attempting to maintain. In front of my buddies, collectively this. The haunting house continued for what seemed like indefinitely, and given my situation, I nearly died from a single jump scare. Hence all the fog and flashing lights made the entire experience much more additional pie and unreal. We entered a room that was illuminated with a bleeding man in an unsettling red glow. Disguised as a man wearing a top hat and a suit. Shouting at us from behind the ACT. There was a man in the room's corner. Who didn't wear anything that matched who he was. Simply standing there and staring at me with my spirit, and as I became aware that I was searching. I screamed at my father's face. Screamed directly from my abdomen as I felt all of my hair stand on end. When the room fell silent, my companions glanced at me giggling initially, believing I was making a joke, but when they noticed that I was seriously grabbed by one of the gals. And said, "What's wrong?" I replied that it's I indicated the corner where they were, Dad. Nobody was standing anymore, and I recalled everything. The confusion between the actor and my pals. And it was evident to all that I was not playing about. My pals were aware of there is no one there in the terrible past. According to one of my pals, the actor seems to. I asked my pals if I was alright, and I was undergoing a severe panic attack. Shouting, "I want to go, I want to go." Noah and I went out the side door. And he sat beside me as our pals completed the attraction. It wasn't inexpensive. So I wasn't going to force everyone to attend. Sitting outside the establishment with me. Noah advised me not to smoke, so. Despite his best efforts to reassure me that there was no dad inside, it was just. My father used to abuse me because I was hallucinating. I am the eldest of my siblings, thus I recall that he left us most of it and our mother one day and didn't return when my close pals knew that I was 10 years old. This to some degree, so I didn't. Noah must be informed when our friends. They met us at a Wendy's once we were finished. Close to where I was merely attempting to eat to help me relax. I felt ashamed, but fortunately, my pals did not pass judgment on my face. At least I had left for home sooner. That I didn't want to do more than everyone else. Ruin their evenings. When I returned home, I knocked out immediately, I suppose because of how inebriated I was that evening. Was experiencing a bad dream about the scene. My father and the haunted house. He was standing in the room's corner. Was telling Charlie to wake up, so I did. I awoke in my dimly lit apartment visiting my father in the middle of the night. Peering down at me from over my bed. His eyes were wide open, and it was actually, this 9-foot tall. An image of my dad stooping down with his physique sculpting in an unattainable manner. It took me a few seconds to notice it. So that I could process what I was seeing. I let forth a scream directly from my abdomen. Once more, my mother hurried inside and turned. The lights were turned on, and the appearance was gone. My blood was pounding, and my heart ran cold and sobbed to my mother upon seeing. It was among the most scarring, Dad. I don't touch the nights of my mature life. Marijuana or other drugs nowadays, except from very little alcohol, and I will never go to once more, a haunted home attraction. The third story. That I felt it might be enjoyable during to obtain employment at a nearby haunted mansion. My friend Marissa was already attracted to. She informed me that they were employed there, searching for aspiring actors and actresses. Worked some magic to land me a job. Following my meeting with the proprietor, there were. The haunted house has several sections. Attraction that features 3 haunted dwellings and the eerie corn maze on the first day of work, there were a little character practice and simply showing off my acting abilities to one of my role, and the supervisors who were on duty was designated to be a damsel for the evening. An anxiety, which indicated that I was leaving. Being shackled to a pole and shouting at the visitors to assist me as they pass me. Naturally, all visitors would be informed. Avoid touching any of the before entering actors or actresses in order for them to be aware. To refrain from genuinely untying me when before opening time, I'm screaming for aid. Jeremiah, the SL coordinating supervisor, led me to my post, which is actually my post since I would be bound to a wooden. After the corn maze, I was shocked to learn that I would need to be tied up and not merely act as though I inquired how I would use the loo and so on. Stated that there would be brief rest periods in between. Additionally, he stated that there would be another manager close by, if I should need anything that gave me a sense of a little better when he left. I was. When left alone, a number of sounds, effects and eerie reverberating ambience loops over the cornfield from the different. There are speakers buried all across the maze. Soon after, a little air horn was heard. The distance showing that the attraction was accessible. Persona, I felt both anxious and thrilled. Considering that I was more in the midst of It wasn't until a few minutes later that corn maze. Omit that the initial visitor would be. I began to put on my best as they passed me. Acting like a damsel in distress. I pretended to cry and screamed in desperation. Everyone who came to his aid said he's returning soon and on time. Some folks would comply, respond to things, and in character, I improvise my responses. Face masks were worn by everyone because of therefore I was unable to view people's full. Eventually encounters 2 male visitors who passed by, appearing to be in their 30s. Observing me without uttering a single word of. He just shot me this, and they slowed down. Look with his large, quiet eyes. It really frightened me. They continued to walk and vanished. This was near the farther end of the maze. The moment I was beginning to understand there would be lengthy intervals between visitors. Occasionally, I might hear someone right away. Sweeping across the surrounding crops, I was pondering whether it was a worker the visitors were not allowed to leave the way. I fully circled back and observed 2 men coming out of the fields in the direction of. I was bound to the same 2 men by the pole. Something wasn't right before. I betrayed integrity by saying, "You people can't go off course." Then one of them. Under their masks, the 2 men giggled. Began using a different language when speaking. One of them walked, and I believe it was Russian. Returning to the trail, but in the opposite direction. Guidance that the visitors are expected to. He simply began to stand there before leaving. Appearing to be on guard while the other began to inappropriately seize me. I Realized what was going on right away and I yelled, "Bloody murder," stating, "Assistance, this isn't covered by the ACT." I called stuff such as "I'm being beaten" and shortly after, one of the managers came out to check on me. By that time, I had already fled with 2 men. Released and led from the labyrinth, I contacted my parents, who demanded that I just go now. Jeremiah and I left. And one of the additional managers stated I would receive payment for the evening, and if I refused to return, they'd comprehend, but to just maintain them in the loop. I wish I could declare it to be finished. However, I was particularly cautious on the way home. Careful to ensure that I wasn't being halfway home. I saw that I had the same white automobile behind me the entire time. When I first started turning down random streets, as well as when the white vehicle remained behind me each and every time I was being pursued, I realized I needed to locate I entered the closest police precinct. Google Maps showed a police station, and I began to drive there, and they trailed me until I finally pulled into the precinct's parking lot, after which they continued driving, but I never saw the vehicle again. Spent 10 minutes in my car before eventually, I turned it back on and started driving home, verifying each moment that I was not being pursued, so I didn't go back to work at that attraction with the scary house once more.